Hey, hi everyone. Welcome back to my channel, Code Dictator. Here we are going to learn about all the Java core concepts. Here I mention my GitHub and Instagram ID. So you can just follow me and you can follow my Instagram ID for source code. So what topic we are going to cover? So in this session we are going to cover about object oriented programming, OOP. So what are the object oriented concepts like object, class, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction and encapsulation. So let's cover all the topic one by one. So object oriented programming. Before going with object oriented concept, so let's say like which language is 100% object oriented. So small talk is your 100% object oriented programming language. But Java is not purely object oriented language, and I already explained that thing like why Java is not 100% object oriented programming language. So you can just go to that part and you can understand the concept why Java is not 100% object oriented. So that link is provided into the description, and as well as if you see that eye icon, so there you will get that link. Okay, so object oriented programming means what? It is a methodology that design your program using your object and class or to implement a real world entities. So what is real world entity? Like just example. So whatever the tangible thing, or just example like the thing which we can touch. So that is what we are calling it as an object. So which is having its own behavior or its own identity. So before discussing about object more, let's understand the concept. What other concepts we have like object, class, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism and encapsulation. So guys, if you are not yet followed my channel, so please subscribe my channel, like it and share with your friends and hit the bell icon to get all notifications. Okay, so object. So object means what? The anything or any entity that is having state and behavior is known as object. So just take an example like chair, pen, table, bike or bag, apple. So these are just objects. That is what real-time entity. So it can be physical or logical. So whenever it's come to the physical, so yeah, it's like it is taking some space. It is consuming some extra spaces, correct? So that is what the tangible thing. But when it's come to the logical part, so logical is what virtual thing, and object means in the logical terminology it consumes some space into the memory. So that is we are calling it as a object. It is having its own address, and the important thing about object is what they can communicate with each other without knowing their implementation, without knowing their code. Only they want only the single thing like how they can communicate with each other. That only thing they require. So let's take an example. Dog is an object. So how it is object? Because dog is having some behavior and its own state. So state is like it's having its own property like color or name or its breed. So that is what basically its state. And behavior means what? Dog can walk, he can bark, he can eat, or he can just move his tail, waving his tail. So these are all the things he can perform. Or just example like human is also an object. So any person, so like any specific man or woman having their own properties like their hair color, eyes color or skin color, and they have their own behaviors like they can walk, talk, they can eat, they can sleep. So this is just a small example of object. So what object having that what characteristics? So let's understand all the concepts. Object basically having three characteristics. So one is what? State. So just now we discussed about state, like it's having its own data or having its own value. Behavior, it's having its own functionality. So what he can do, that is what the functionality. And it's come to the identity. So basically identity is what like So just an example, our Aadhaar card, that is what the identity, and everyone having their own Aadhaar card. So that is basically their own identity, and that is unique thing. So the similar way, each object as a logical terminology having their own unique ID, and that will be used internally by the JVM. So that's why we are calling it as the characteristics of any object. So follow my Instagram ID for the source code. Okay, so how to create object? This is what the big question. Just now we understand lot of thing about object, but how to create an object? So there are basically 3 steps. So one is declaration. You can declare your object. So type means what? The type of it can be anything. Like object itself, we can just create object of object class, which is a parent class of all classes, or you can create your own customized class like student, employee, or college, and then you can set their name like college name or student name, anything. The second step, new keyword. So basically new create is for your instantiation. So whenever you create any object, so it allocate a memory at a runtime. So that's why we use new keyword to get some memory into the heap area. And then it's come to the initialization. So initialization is basically what, like you are allocating that memory or that space to that whatever we declaration part is we done with that. So you are just allocating that values to that declaration part. So there are basically 3 different ways to initialize your object, like by reference variable, by method, or by constructor. So let's take an example how it works internally. So this is a small program which is like shape. Shape is my class name, and it is having few properties or some functions. So like shape is basically a constructor, and which is taking 2 parameters like height and width, and we are performing summation of both, and we are storing it as a into the another primitive variable. Okay, so in the main method, if you see, we have stack memory and heap memory. So whatever the local variable or object or any declaration part we are doing, so that will get stored into the stack memory, and whatever the memory allocation thing that will perform into the, it will store into the heap memory. So whenever we create shape S1, so basically shape is a class, so that is the type of my object, and S1 is the name of my object, so that will get stored into the stack memory. And when I use new keyword, so it creates one memory or one location, it consumes some address into the heap memory. And when I call that constructor of my class, so it construct, basically it's create or it writes that all the properties on that specific location. So if you see, the shape is having 2 parameters, one is height and one is width. So that 10 will allocate that value to the height and 20 will allocate to the width. And when we use equal to symbol, that is basically assignment symbol. So when we use equal to symbol there, then only your object get bind with your memory location. This is how that object creation works. So let's take one more example, simple. So shape S2, so same thing, like S2 gets stored into the stack memory. When we use create the new variable, so new keyword, so it create a new location into the heap area, and we are calling that constructor of my class shape, and we are passing 2 values as a parameter like 3 and 40. So basically 3 is like height and 40 is your width. And when we use equal to symbol, so it gets point to your object that is present inside your heap area. So the similar way, S3 new keyword is creating the memory location, shape is constructor to construct your object into the heap area, and equal to symbol basically that assignment operator to assign that value or that location to your object. You guys can follow my Git ID for the source code. Okay, so we learned a lot of things about object, but what are the other ways to create an object? So let's understand one by one. So one is like using new keyword. So mostly we prefer the new keyword but there are n number of ways. Okay, so we'll look into that. One is like using new instance method, using clone method, using deserialization, and using factory method. So for this concept the scope is only till new keyword, but in future we are going to learn all the other parts. So there is something called anonymous object. So what exactly anonymous object is? So anonymous object is basically what which don't have any calling method with any specific object name. So that is we are calling it as anonymous object. So if you see the example, in this example we have calculation class. So if it is not an anonymous object, so basically we are performing like calculation C equal to new calculation, and then we are going to call our method which is fact with some parameter like C dot fact, and we are passing that parameter as 5, and then it will call my method and it will perform all the operation. But if you see calling through anonymous object, so without creating any object of any type, directly you can use new keyword and simply your class name or class constructor dot your method name, and simply you can pass your parameter. So no need to create any object or any type, simply directly you can call your object with the help of new keyword. That is what your anonymous object.